So in this segment, we're going to be talking about how the UK is still not doing enough to tackle the shortage of lorry drivers. There's a separate article which talks about how we're going to see shortages in things like milk and I think other vegetables because of the shortage in heavy goods vehicle drivers. But point being is that the UK is still not doing enough to resolve the problem. So government plans to tackle the UK's chronic driver shortage will take at least 5 months to take in effect. So let's not forget here, we have a shortage now. Right now there's a shortage, and these changes will not take effect until potentially after Christmas. And Christmas is when we have a massive ramp up in people buying stuff because, people who celebrate Christmas, they buy presents for their kids and their family and whatever else. And so we're going to see it far worse towards the bottom end of the year, especially as the weather gets worse as well. And the government policies, once again, is still not good enough. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps offered to fast-track licensing processes to get an army of new lorry drivers on the road, which is not enough to fix the problem affecting summer, autumn and Christmas supplies, experts have said. And even if you do fast-track these drivers, again, it's very dangerous to do this. Having a fleet of, newly trained lorry drivers who may not be trained properly, or at least may not have experience driving within adverse weather conditions, that's going to be very dangerous, especially when you're driving a heavy goods vehicle. This thing, if it swerves or if it hits a car, that's it, rest in peace, F for respects. People are going to die. We've already seen, I remember there was a story a few years ago in Scotland where people were hit by a lorry and it caused multiple deaths because I think the driver fell asleep at the wheel. That's how dangerous these vehicles can be if they're not driven by drivers who are trained properly and have had enough sleep. So what the UK, again, the decisions we're making are incredibly dangerous. While they have laid out some things that we would like to do, the way things stand, we cannot see a resolution this side of Christmas, said James Firth, head of the road freight regulatory policy at Logistics UK, which represents freight owners, including supermarkets. There's so many of these industry bodies, it's insane. It estimates a shortage of 90,000 heavy goods vehicle drivers. We've seen different estimates at 100,000, including an estimate of 25,000 EU truckers who have gone home following Brexit, which is something the Brexiteers wanted. They wanted British people driving British lorries to British supermarkets carrying British goods. Did I say British enough times? On top of that, there is a backlog of 25,000 applications for truck driving licenses. So even if you manage to get through this backlog, that's still not even going to make a dent. At most, you're going to replace the EU drivers who have gone, but these will be dudes who are not dudes, but people who are way more experienced in driving, which mean that they might get to destinations quicker, and who are also better at driving under adverse conditions as well, which will stop accidents happening as often. Ministers announced a consultation on Tuesday to allow drivers to take one test to drive articulated and rigid lorries to speed up the process for attaining licenses for all types of HGV. So they're changing the rules in order to get more drivers on the road. Now, I looked up what articulated lorries meant, and in this context it means having two or more sections connected by a flexible joint. And I don't know if it's safe to have those sorts of lorries driven by inexperienced drivers if it's got multiple hinges, if that makes sense. So like the trailer kind of swerves a bit more when they're driving, but I know nothing about lorry drivers, and I think neither does Grant Shapps, to be honest. The plans were criticised by the Road Haulage Association, actual experts in the field, for failing to address critical short-term issues in the sector. First said new proposals to clear the backlog of HGV driving tests could not take effect until October at the earliest because they require legislation, so there's no chance of getting through that backlog anytime soon. Our members tell us the only thing that is going to solve this in the short term is flexibility of the immigration system. Now, let's not forget here, the UK talked about an Australian points-based system which was meant to benefit the country where we have a shortage of skills. So the government could easily spin this with the lorry driver stuff by saying we've added lorry drivers or heavy goods vehicle drivers onto the skill shortage list because we want to have a flexible, pragmatic approach to immigration, because that's what they were banging on before. They could literally use this. They could spin this as a success for the, quote, Australian points-based system. But instead, they're so dumb, they don't even know how to do that. And instead, they're risking food shortages. Sorry, not risking it. Food shortages are happening because of this British government and because of their stupidity. They could easily spin this as a win for the immigration system if they were smart enough. I suppose that's what happens when you lose your best spin doctor, huh? But the government has ruled this out in a letter. In a letter, Shapps, the Environment Secretary, George Eustace, and the Work and Pension Secretary, Theresa Coffey, real piece of work she is, said the industry needs to develop people resident in the UK as opposed to specifically providing visas for this group of workers. Like, bro, like, they're trying. There's a 25,000 driver backlog. So the industry is trying to resolve this issue, but what they need from you is leeway to resolve the crisis now so they can have more time to train people up. You could easily say to the industry, look, we're going to lower the restrictions on heavy goods vehicle drivers for a year. You have 1 year to train, I don't know, say 50, 60,000 lorry drivers to deal with the shortage. But they're not doing that. This group of clowns can't spin this stuff. They don't know how to do it, even though I've told them exactly how to do it. I'm not even a spin doctor, and I'm giving you this advice for free. Normally they have to charge, 100k to get advice like this. Man, Priti Patel's new points-based system requires low-skilled workers coming into the UK who are not on a skills shortage list to have A-levels or equivalent or above, ruling out many lorry drivers, because these are, certain I think vocational skills. You don't really go through A-levels. You go through, training in that field. Maybe it's a carpentry course or whatever else. They're not classed as A-levels. And even like forcing people to come in to have A-levels is just a bit ridiculous, considering most of the shortages we have are within skilled sectors that don't require academic education. Like, you don't need an academic education to be good at fruit picking. All you have to do is be physically fit, understand when the fruits are ripe, and have good technique when you're pulling up vegetables and fruit so you don't do your back in. Like, come on, guys. The industry said is exceptionally difficult to attract staff to an industry that is not seen as appealing to young people. One guy blamed Tony Blair for this. Like, really? One logistics boss told the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee that it was embarrassing that she could not hire new drivers even after hiking salaries by 15 to 20%. Now, lorry driving is very dangerous. It's also, a job where you're not going to see your family for days or weeks on end, potentially. Also, the fact that there aren't a lot of public toilets or, showers, facilities. They mentioned that here. Within particularly Kent, which would be a choke point, essentially, for lorry drivers, because they need to get to France. So if we actually made, these lorry parks could include things like proper toilets, showers, maybe a cafe, so then, drivers can take a break whilst all their papers are being checked. Papera are being checked. But, we've decided to make this rubbish. This government have closed down loads of, public toilets and other facilities, or charge people money to use them. So again, this is another sort of symptom of not just Brexit, but also of austerity. Last month, Unite Union said the ban on parking in laybys and the shortage of parking and toilet facilities had left services and lorry parks in the country chronically overcrowded. And why would you want to join an industry where you're not gonna you're gonna be locked out of your cab when you go into deliver food or whatever to supermarkets? The bit where they actually sit in when they drive. You're going to have to queue up in a massive queue for toilets and showers, if you even have access to those. It's a very difficult job to do, and the UK really needs to look at fixing the kind of driving experience, for lack of a better phrase, for drivers. Otherwise, you're not going to attract many, even if you do increase wages. Sean Brennan, chief executive of the Cold Chain Federation, which represents chilled warehouse owners, said the driver shortage is compounded by staff shortages caused by the pandemic, now hitting food storage and deliveries. We have been in a rolling crisis since the beginning of 2020, and let's not forget here, the pandemic was raging on from last year, but Brexit has created way more problems than we had last year. We didn't have as many shortages. We had shortages last year because of panic buying. Now they have no stuff to put on the shelves for people to panic buy. That's how bad the situation has gotten. In an industry where we beat ourselves up if we didn't have 98% fulfillment on our orders to delivery, we're now at 80%. So 20% of the things aren't being delivered, when that was only at 2%. They would get angry over 2%. Now 20% of deliveries aren't being made. We've heard about how, shops are getting their deliveries later on in the day, not in the early morning, but in terms of more in sort of 11 towards the afternoon, where that makes it incredibly difficult for people to buy stuff, because if you go to the supermarket in the morning, now they won't have shelves stocked until the afternoon/evening, so you're not going to be able to get the stuff that you want. They go on to say, what we have seen in the last 8 weeks is retailers starting to lower their expectations. So instead of 5 deliveries a week, that would go to 3 deliveries a week. And that's another thing that's going to cause shortages, especially when they can't get certain products into the lorries anyways. We're already seeing multiple problems. We're seeing problems within on the farms. We're seeing problems within processing of meat and vegetables, and we're seeing problems within the supply chain for heavy goods vehicles. Multiple problems on top of problems on top of problems, which are causing shortages. The supermarkets are doing their best to hide them, but if you look to a decent level, you'll see the shortages. You'll see the empty shelves. The industry can't forecast 2 months ahead and don't have headspace to think about Christmas, and that's another crisis that's going to happen. And I do wonder at that point, who are the government going to blame? They've already tweaked the algorithm for the test and trace, so then less people are going to get pinged, which is going to further create problems and further exacerbate the pandemic to an extent. But more than just that, how are you going to resolve this crisis in Christmas, where we're going to see another surge in cases as people move towards talking to each other more indoors, considering with the lovely British weather we're having, which is just raining all the time. Thanks for that, the powers that be. But point being is that you're already seeing a crisis now thanks to COVID and thanks to the shortage in heavy goods vehicles. And as these drivers get more burnt out, you might see more people leaving the industry because it's just not worth it for them. Constantly driving on the road more and more. They might be offered more money, but it might not be worth it to a point where your health is impacted, your mental health is impacted because you can't see your family, you're not having enough breaks, etc. There's massive overcrowding, and you might get to the point where it's just not worth it for you anymore. You might leave the industry, and despite the salary increases, you might see a further driver shortage because the experience for them is just horrible. No one wants to work in a field where their health is being impacted, their mental health is being impacted, etc. No one wants to do that. No one wants to burn themselves out for a salary. So they might move on to other fields, who knows. But we've got a quote from the doc, Dr. Anna Jowazaska, an expert in these kind of areas, which said it's worth listening to the industry now, not in 6 months when someone writes a report on it. Had the British government from the start of the year said, look, we've got a shortage in lorry drivers, so what are we going to do? We allow foreign drivers to come in, EU drivers to come in for a set time, say a year or two, and that's when we start putting visa restrictions in place properly, and we tell industry in advance, get ready, because this is going to happen, and if anything does go wrong, it's on you now. We've given you enough time. Whilst, the UK didn't do that, we have a heavy goods vehicle shortage in terms of drivers. We have lorries that are just sat there because there's no one to drive them. And we're facing crisis after crisis. But yeah, I don't know what more I can say, apart from, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Subscribe to the Patron if you can. Support on Patreon is always mega valued, but just share the content, like the content, comment, let YouTube know that the content is decent and you're actually enjoying it, and hopefully this will get spread on to more people. But anyways, look, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.